Today is a special day for many reasons. Most of you know today is my first Sunday as the official pastor of Cathedral of Hope and Church of the Open Arms. Today, however, is also the 6-year anniversary to the date of when I was ordained right here in this sanctuary on Valentine's Day 2010. It felt fortuitous to be able to look at my calendar a few months ago and realize that we would be able to have our first Sunday together on that important anniversary. A funny thing happened earlier this week regarding my schedule and my calendar. Several years ago, I finally gave up my paper calendar and daybook and tried out Google Calendars because I learned that I could access it on my phone and I didn't always have to make sure I had my paper calendar on me at all times. Now I put all of my appointments and meetings into my Google Calendar, and then I share that calendar with my sweetie Dana so that she can pull it up on her phone and have some idea about what my schedule is and when to expect me home. She was looking ahead to see what was planned on my calendar for this Sunday, and at the top of the calendar as an all-day event, she saw that I had scheduled for, quote, uncertainty. She mentioned this to me and thought that it was a profound and wise move on my part to actually schedule the experience of uncertainty all day long on my first Sunday and my new calls. Eventually, I had to tell her that no, I had not purposefully or wisely scheduled for uncertainty, but instead that was the theme for worship as laid out in our new 6-week Lenten worship series, Gifts of the Dark Wood. However, I do think that the Spirit had a part to play in aligning this theme, uncertainty, for our first Sunday together. Not yet having 1 week under my belt, I can tell you that there are a lot of things that I am uncertain about. I'm uncertain about what my daily and weekly rhythm will look like as a solo pastor. I'm uncertain about what will unfold in our futures together. I'm uncertain of what your names are, so I'm so glad that you're all wearing name tags. I'm uncertain about how the heating and lighting works, when the garbage is picked up, how all the leadership teams function, and which keys on my keychain fit which doors. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm uncertain about what I've gotten myself into, being a half-time pastor to 2 churches. But in the midst of the things I've been feeling uncertain about, I feel trust in some very important things. I trust you, that you are good people with a Spirit-led mission. I trust that God has called us to be together to continue to create something good, true, beautiful, and just. I trust that in all our collective uncertainties, that we will be able to figure the rest out along the way. For those of you who were not here last Ash Wednesday, I want to orient you to our next 7 Sundays and the path which we've chosen to follow for the next 6 weeks. Last Wednesday began the church season called Lent, which is the 40 days leading up to Easter, not including Sundays. During this church season, we remember when Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights to pray and prepare himself before he went out to do the things that God had equipped him to do with his life. For Jesus, those 40 days included being in nature and listening to Spirit in silence. It included times of temptation and wrestling with his own demons. This year, the worship leadership of both churches decided that we would spend these 40 days before Easter exploring the themes laid out in a book written by UCC pastor Eric Elms called Gifts of the Dark Wood. You can see we have the dark wood in the sanctuary among us. The dark wood refers to a place that the Italian poet Dante Alighieri wrote about in the Middle Ages in his Divine Comedy. It's a metaphorical place in life that all of us find ourselves in from time to time. Some people call it the dark night of the soul. Maybe that's a term that's more familiar to people. It's not a place where you plan to go, where you intend to go, one day you just find yourself there. Some people arrive in the dark woods through the ending of a relationship. through a new health diagnosis, a job loss, or by doubting everything that you have been taught that you should believe. Some people arrive in the dark woods through our theme today, uncertainty, through exhaustion or questioning your purpose in life. The thing about the dark woods, though, is that even though it's often bewildering to arrive there at first, it can be a place of profound nourishment, like the deep, rich, dark soil that a seed finds itself in. The dark woods is a place where we meet God, Spirit, and mystery. A place where we can gain unimaginable blessings that allow us to sprout and to bloom. The place in the dark woods that we're visiting today is the location of uncertainty in our lives. The contemporary reading about the swan comes to us from the life experience of a poet whose work I have loved for many years. British poet David White was having a private conversation with his friend David Stendhal Ross, who was also a Benedictine monk. Before becoming a poet, David had been feeling uncertain about his life, feeling worn down and trapped by his work. He asked the monk to tell him about exhaustion, because that's what he was feeling day in and day out. The monk said that the antidote to exhaustion is not necessarily rest, which is what I would have thought the cure would have been. Instead, he said the antidote to exhaustion is wholeheartedness. When you expend your energy on things that have nothing to do with your true powers or God-given gifts, then you will feel exhausted. The monk referred David to the swan. Swans were not made for walking on the ground, so when they do walk on dry land, they waddle awkwardly. When we expend our energy on things that have nothing to do with our true powers and gifts, it may look and feel awkward, and it may exhaust us. There's nothing the swan can do on land to make him or herself seem more graceful. However, when the swan moves into water, the place where she belongs, everything is transformed. Grace, beauty, and ease of movement abound. The awkwardness and exhaustion fade away because she is operating from the place where she was created to be. In 2007, I briefly tried to take up tennis. I had my own racket and clear plastic canister of 3 yellow tennis balls. I went to the courts and tried to hit the ball back and forth over the net with a tennis partner. Every time the ball came to me, I whacked it as hard as I could. I could feel the impact all the way through my hand, wrist, arm, and shoulder. I went back to the courts a handful of times, but after each try, I would go home with a sore arm and my body feeling exhausted. I couldn't imagine how this game could be any fun. Then I learned about the sweet spot. According to Elms, the sweet spot on a tennis racket is that place near the center of the strings where the vibrations transmitted through the impact of the ball cancel themselves out, making the players nearly unaware that the impact has occurred. Hitting the sweet spot, therefore, feels natural and almost effortless. It allows the players to invest their energies into playing the game and not merely hitting the ball. There are sweet spots on golf clubs and baseball bats as well. Apparently, you have to practice a lot in order to be able to find the sweet spot. There are a lot of small adjustments that must be made as impacts continue to arrive. But eventually you figure it out and the game becomes worthwhile, exhilarating, and makes you feel alive. I never felt called to find the sweet spot on a tennis racket. But the very reason I ended up here today as a pastor has something to do with paying attention to when I felt those sweet spot moments in my life. Do any sweet spot moments jump out to you from your home life experience? Perhaps sweet spot moments come to mind concerning this church and its many experiences over the years. I do believe Jesus worked on finding his sweet spots while in the desert during those 40 days of contemplation and reflection. He emerged from that time away, continuing to make small adjustments in his life as he lived into a calling which was worthwhile and utilized the gifts and purpose which God had given to him. In the absence of sweet spots, we feel uncertain. Our society and religious institutions place a lot of value on certainty. Being certain about things brings a sense of security. If we can be certain about something, we feel that we are right and correct. Being certain about religion creates two camps, at least, those who feel that they are right and those who must be wrong. I myself like to be certain. I like to be certain about how much money I have in the bank, where my next meal is coming from, who I can trust, what my schedule for the day and week looks like. But in some areas of our lives, we actually prefer uncertainty. If you were certain about exactly how a movie was going to end up, bypassing any plot twists or turns, would it still be as enjoyable? Would the Harry Potter series be as impactful if one of the villains, Snape, hadn't been shown to be on the good side in the final moments of the book and movies? Too much certainty can become monotonous, predictable, without joy or adventure. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians speaks to this issue. He says, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly. Now we know only in part." Children need certainty to a point. They need stability and structure to know that they are safe, secure, and loved. But Paul says that becoming an adult is like seeing in a mirror dimly and knowing only in part. Seeing in a mirror dimly means that some things remain a mystery. You can't quite see everything there is to see. Knowing only in part means not fully understanding all there is to know about faith and about God. Uncertainty is a given in the adult faith life. And if adults insist on being certain about everything, perhaps they are reverting to childish ways. I'm reading a daily devotional during Lent, and one of the lines that I read yesterday said, "Do not forget that you serve a mystery, that neither you nor your father's father nor your mother's mother began." Ellen's notes in the Darkwoods book, "Religion does a disservice when it seeks to remove uncertainty from life." He says, "Have you ever noticed how the more certainty a religion claims to deliver, the more frenzied and hysterical are its adherents? Faith built upon certainty is a house of cards. It falls apart when the unshakable foundation shifts, even slightly." The monk in our story earlier was advising the poet to replace certainty with trust in those sweet spot moments. Those moments that orient you toward your place in the world. If you have been waddling on dry land for very long, chances are you become used to it. However awkward your waddling may feel, it feels normal to you. Sometimes what is needed is a little shove from the Spirit into those waters to get us swimming. How about you? Have there been any gentle shoves from the Spirit into waters lately? Any places in your life when you have been journeying with uncertainty? Any moments when you feel like a swan out of water, awkwardly trying to waddle through your days, doing the best you can? Such a practice definitely is exhausting. I'd like to come back to the advice from the monk about the antidote to exhaustion. The cure is not always simple rest, but to live from a place of wholeheartedness. Do you have your whole heart engaged in the relationships? Is your whole heart involved in the manner in which you spend your days? Is your whole heart flowing into your faith life? Are you using your true powers and God-given gifts? And are you open to spending the next 40 days paying attention to those moments in your life that feel like sweet spots? Those times when you're operating from the center of your life, where the vibrations of those things that come at you as impacts cancel themselves out. When you experience a relationship or undertaking that feels natural, worthwhile, or exhilarating, pay attention. Take note. It just might be a gift for you from the dark woods. I never did become a tennis player, but along the way I observed those times that made sense in my life. That time my heart was on fire in the 6th grade when I first attended church camp in Hinton, Oklahoma, and so very much wanted to be like the pastors that led our worship. Or that time during my freshman year when I signed up to be a small group leader on a church retreat and had more fun and saw gifts I didn't even know I had being utilized. Those small little nudges from the Spirit which arrived via the encouragement or recommendations from those around me who saw visions of my future that I hadn't even imagined before. There are still a lot of things I'm uncertain about in life, but that's okay, because the blessing that can emerge from uncertainty when we are in the middle of the dark woods is the opportunity to look for wholeheartedness, for sweet spot moments, for places that feel like water to a swan. Who knows, maybe next year I will even plan for a little more uncertainty in my Google Calendar. May it be so.